Welcome to the Workforce Connections podcast, where we discuss workforce development in Southern Nevada. Here's your host.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the WC podcast. Today, we have a very special guest visiting us he's through Chicago, coming from New York, the CEO of Equus and a partner of our system now for many years, Doug Cotter. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jaime. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I know that you travel a lot. You know, you've been from airport to airport. That's part of the job. But before we get to the professional side of you, we like to start our podcast sharing with our audience a little bit about where you come from. So tell us where you were born, where you grew up, went to school. Take us perhaps to your first job out of high school.
Sure. I grew up in a suburb of New York City, actually in New Jersey. And after graduating high school, I went straight into the military. So that could be construed as my first job. I was in the military in the U.S. Army for a couple of years in mechanized infantry.
Wow.
After that, I came back to New York City, went to school at night. And then my first job, well, while I was going to school, I was working maintenance. And then my first job was as a headhunter during a .com boom.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's the workforce immediately.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was my first taste of when you get somebody a job, you know, the first person that I placed in a job, and you tell that person they have a job, and that excitement and that rush was really what pulled me in.
Yeah.
And I was in staffing for a number of years until the bubble burst.
That's really cool. And when you said U.S. military, you know, one of our latest podcasts was somebody who's also in field artillery, and he was expressing again how the military and, of course, technology has changed so much since his years in the military, where you actually shot cannons and stuff.
Right.
But one of I think the cool things that he talked about is that most of the time, military folks, not only do they learn discipline and technical skills, but more importantly, you don't think about it a lot, but relationship management.
Yeah.
And so that I can see that now where you got those seedlings.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Yeah. It taught you a lot of things. I mean, the importance of teamwork, of camaraderie, you know, all the things that, as you know, as a leader of an organization that are essential to effective teams.
Absolutely. Well, good. Well, thank you for your service then.
Yeah,
I never knew.
Pleasure.
Yeah. So now let's switch a little bit about the second part of your journey. So you get in there, you get a taste of placing people in a jobs and staffing agency. What pivotal moments in your professional career journey prepared you for now being the CEO of Equus?
Well, I think, you know, in a staffing industry, you know, it's a bit of emotional intelligence, understanding people, having empathy, identifying certain skill sets in people. And you know, that carried over when I went into workforce. And then, you know, in staffing, you're a one-man band. You're operating almost like an independent business. And, you know, after the .com bubble burst, I opened my own business for a number of years doing staffing. But then when I found workforce, you know, the .com bubble had burst. I was looking for something else, and I saw an ad for a business service manager in a workforce system working with TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. Wow. And, you know, the thrill that I got from placing someone in a tech job as a developer, you know, when I went into working with TANF, where folks were really struggling and, you know, with multiple barriers, and to be able to place those folks into employment, the feeling in that, I knew I had found my place, you know. So, you know, the passion for it was there. And then as I started to lead teams, you know, that's when it's like a force multiplier. You know, as you start to put together strong teams, the impact that you make is multiplied. And then when I went over to Grant and then eventually took over as president, you know, the ability to affect, and you can, I'm sure, relate to this, Jaime, affect change in an entire organization and start to create impact at scale, it's really powerful. So, when the opportunity for Equus came along, Equus is the largest, oldest, premier workforce development company in the nation, and I've been chasing Equus my entire professional career. And they've helped me be better in kind of raising the bar and trying to get there. So when the opportunity came to work with Equus and make impact at this scale, it's just an opportunity that I could not pass up. I mean, Equus we're going to hopefully, if we can honor the commitment that we made to the communities we serve, we're going to help over 70,000 people gain access to good jobs this year. We're going to help generate over $1.3 billion of income. And through this work that $1.3 billion is food on the table, roof over the head, rent, be able to buy a home, save for retirement. So working for a company at this scale is just the highlight of my career.
And I love that you use the word multiplier, because a lot of times we stop in saying, we're helping that person, earn the money that they're going to use for those things. But we sometimes forget to mention that we're also saving the taxpayer that money that we use to subsidize the housing, subsidize the, through welfare, TANF, unemployment. And so it's kind of a multiplier effect there, the return on investment of this work. So
that's right.
I'm glad you said that. I think one of the things, that I really connect to the work here at Workforce Connections, our mission statement is quite simply connecting employers to our ready workforce. And I know that's the two sides of the equation. If the employers or the businesses are our customers and the product we are supplying them with is a ready workforce, right? You're looking at the supply demand. Now, it's very complex to have a ready product. A ready worker, as you said, when you're grabbing them with multiple barriers, it is not easy. It's a noble work. I think it's lengthy work because it's, again, multiple barriers. So can you remind us of the mission statement for Equus? I know you say you told us about the commitment, but how does that relate to the mission statement? And if so, after your mission statement for Equus, how does your daily role as the CEO help that mission become a reality?
Yeah. We change lives. That's what we do, and that's our mission statement. And within my role in Equus, I have a staff of over 3,000 people, and I have the ability. My vocation is a workforce development professional, so I start at home. I have the ability to help people self-actualize and thrive and grow professionally, and help creating or contributing to a culture that people can really be their best. Because that if I can do that, if I have 3,000 people who working with purpose in tandem, that feel like they're bringing their best to the table every day, the impact that they can make is really incredible. And you talked about the multiplier effect. I mean, for every dollar that we spend in our funding, we generate over $6 for the communities we serve. So you do the math on that, and that's an incredible number.
Yes, a tremendous return on investment, which makes it more, I think, necessary that our voice, as you and I talk a lot about advocacy on the Hill, because if these programs that have a tremendous return on investment, sometimes that people don't know that they're on the list of being, let's do less of that and let's spend money on this other thing that has, if not no return, less return for sure. So I think we as a system can always get better at articulating that return on investment that you just described. One of the things that I do remember with you over the years, again, is you've watched our region, not from afar, because you even would come here into town, we'd check in on each other. And now, by product of you being the new president, CEO of Equus, you, if you will, now inherited this relationship. And we have multi-million-dollar contract with Equus to staff our American Job Centers. And I'm sure of the 70,000 people commitment nationwide, we own a portion of that. I'm not going to quiz you on the number, but tell us about your experience with us, first a few years from afar, looking at us, and now being connected to us contractually. What has your experience been with our region, and what's the impact that you kind of have seen and are now seeing closely of the work we do here together?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, as I said, when I was chasing Equus, it's about the work that they're doing. And a lot of that work that we're doing is here in Vegas. I can remember years ago, I was a director of a sector center, one of the first sector centers in New York City, and it was a transportation center. And I was part of a sector practicum. And one of the first places that we came to was Vegas, because you had that hospitality training center. And then years later, when you took the reins here, the things that you're doing as far as being embedded in a chamber of commerce, like really having that link, you talked about it a little bit, about that connection with business, but really being embedded with the chamber, to be embedded with a business, with the community college, that's really progressive. There's, you were, and Vegas was really at the forefront of that. And then one of the things that I'd say, and answer your question, like now that I'm in it, what do I see? And we talked about this the other night, is, when you put together organizations or teams or systems, which you have done, there's the mechanics of it. Like, of course, it makes sense to have the business, right? Of course, it makes sense to have the chamber and the community college and reentry programs, right? And that's the mechanics, but the people aspect of it. When when I saw you on stage with all of your partners at NAB, National Association of Workforce Boards Conference, it really clicked for me the rapport that you had with one another, because we're in a people business, and organizations and systems are people. So you could tell that you had that connection with each other and a passion for the work, and everyone on that stage was mission first, which in this business, it's not always the case, right? There's some organizations that are organizations first, there's some that are ego first, but you assembled this team of folks that they're mission first, and that they're working in tandem and all rowing together for the greater good of the community. To me, that's what the secret sauce is. You can have the mechanics of it and have the right people and organizations in a site, but it's really the people. So, I learned from that too. When I'm trying to create the most effective, impactful company that I can, it's like, do I have the right people on the bus? Do I have them in the right seats? Do I have the culture that's going to help us drive the success and create the impact that we're looking to create? So Vegas and you have put together a system that not all workforce systems across the country are doing. And we were talking before we got on camera, there's, as folks come into the industry, I think it's upon us to really help raise the floor and share with them. And you've always been so generous with your time and insights to help those other systems out there that aren't quite where we need them to be.
Thank you for noticing that about culture, because yes, I think one of the things we're most proud of is that we moved into this building with the Vegas Chamber. Now we're in the same building. We've been great partners for a while now, living miles away from each other. Them hosting an American Job Center for us, them sitting on our board as the CEO of the Vegas Chamber has sat on our board for years. But part of the proof that is, like you said, really a relationship is that their charter and the bylaws of the Vegas Chamber said that to be a trustee of the chamber, you needed to be from the business community, either a CEO of an organization like you and I, or the owner of a business. And so, but they really believed that we were better together, chamber and local workforce board. So they changed the bylaws to allow me to be on their board of trustees and bring this voice of the workforce development system. So that's proof to what you're saying. You saw us on stage say, hashtag we like each other. That's why we put on social media. Yeah. And that's great and it's fun, but it must demonstrate itself in actions. And so I'm glad that you saw that. Thank you for noticing that. Both you and I think, I always often look back, and I think you figured it out earlier than I did with that experience about helping somebody get a job. But I know that it wasn't a long time ago that I saw somewhere that said, my goal is to be the executive director of a local workforce development board. Most of my peers share that story. They're like, yeah, I was an engineer or an Army officer, and I landed here. So there's 575 workforce, board directors, and many of them are your customers. Yeah. As you have customers across the country, and you visit us, like you are here in Las Vegas now, what major trends do you see appearing in our world? Because we're hearing again of OSWA, right? The Stronger Workforce for America bill being reintroduced in the House of Representatives, no longer a bipartisan bill, now a partisan bill. So we see legislative trends that mirror the divisive politics we live in today. We see things like AI, trends influencing our work. Is there other things than that, whether more important, less important, but what do you see really emerging in our world that's going to be impactful?
I think some of the things that we just talked about, the importance of partnerships, with diminishing resources, we have to make sure that we're working with one another and leveraging each other's resources, the partnerships with community college, sector-based initiatives. I was just in Chicago yesterday, and we have a really strong healthcare initiative. I'd mentioned in New York, we have a transportation manufacturing sector center. I know here you're doing some great work. We talked about the hospitality, but you're also doing some great work with healthcare. So really having that business voice at the table to help inform the types of trainings that we're doing. And as you know, the world of work is changing really quickly, and everyone's trying to figure out, not just in a workforce community, but in a business community, how do we integrate technology in the work that we do? In the work that we do, it's very compliance driven. So there is an opportunity to leverage technology to take away some of that rote tasks that we have to do because of compliance, insert technology to help free up the human side of what we do. So we're seeing more of that. And, even here in Las Vegas, we're running a pilot with you. Thank you for your partnership, thing called EQ Connects, where we have a platform that's going to have virtual interviewing, resume creation, career pathways, and then also 24/7 connection to career coaches, because the way that especially our youth interact with one another, it's a lot of it's digital. So how do we leverage that and be able to connect with the youth to be able to pull them in, and the adults, using this emergent technology that we have?
I think that's a great example, because there's more to come. And my years in the hospitality sector, right as I was leaving, things were becoming more automated. AI was still not a thing 20 years ago, but automation was.
Yeah.
The hotels were looking at ways, not just hotels, airports were looking at ways at making the services more efficient. I remember a day where, somebody had to tag your bag, but now you walk into an airport, deal with a kiosk, and you get this sticker and you tag your bag, right? And so hotels, I think the same way. As I was leaving, we were testing little, if you will, carts that were connected to a system, and the carts were programmed to deliver sheets all across the hotel, right? Would right in the elevator, open up, somebody would come and take the sheets off, and off we go to the next floor. And so for years now, we've been seeing this. There's robotic bartenders here in Las Vegas, where you go to a bar, run your credit card, and a robotic arc comes up and shakes the thing and pours. And so those things are happening, but more than ever now, I think there's an exponential acceleration of this curve of artificial intelligence, right? Sometimes for me, it's hard to even understand everything that's happening, but hopefully, as you were talking about in our system, I have the hope that these improvements will allow us to deal with the quantifiable, if you will, work that needs to be done, and free up the human element to do more of the quality work, right? The elevated work where you need compassion, empathy, critical thinking to be able to help these people with multiple barriers. I think it's a great thing if we can ease the caseload of our career coaches in our centers, reduce the amount of paperwork they have to do, reduce the amount of data entry or analysis, and they can be freed up to do more of this human element work. Do you share the same hope?
I agree. And I think when we think about innovation, it doesn't have to be those big things. We're excited about this platform, but there's other things that we're doing around case notes and those types of things. And I think about, when the Wright brothers, were the first ones to fly an airplane, that was a big innovation, but it wasn't till years later that they figured out to put wheels on a suitcase. People were still lugging giant suitcase. So when I think about what we need to be doing and focusing on, sure, there's going to be those big things and those big platforms that help us get there. But to your point, what are those little things that can help us be incrementally better, that allows us to free up that time? Because we are in the people business. And how do we spend more time with people, working with them with empathy and respect, and helping them transform their lives?
I agree. What actions would you like to see happen at the federal level? Again, I just mentioned earlier that out of the House just came now a partisan bill. It used to be bipartisan, in hopes to reauthorize WIO. And I think you and I would agree that, yes, we need to reauthorize the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, because funding levels should be different, because there's new technologies, because the reality is just different. But we don't necessarily agree that that there should be there is a prescriptive formula that applies to every state and every region equally. So, what kind of changes would you like to see at the federal level?
Well, to your point, I would like to see WIOA reauthorized. I think that the WIOA workforce system is the best mechanism to help the residents of our country become empowered with the skills to meet this future economy that we're building. There's no other system like it here. So really leveraging the system, funding it at a higher level. As you know, there hasn't been an increase in funding for WIOA in a very, very long time. And as prices, as inflation hits, it's important that we have a certain level of funding. I think that also, there's a lot of talk about waivers and how do we leverage those waivers. I think the workforce community needs to come together, and I was going to talk to you about this later, is really looking at what are the waivers that we think could clear the way for us to be really impactful, to help us get as many people empowered with the skills that they need to find good jobs with career advancement potential. So thinking about the waivers, I know Rick Beasley in Florida is thinking creatively about that. But I think if we put our heads together, there's waivers that we can talk about, like opportunity zones and those types of things, to really help us be as impactful as possible within the legislation that we currently have. Because I think we're in agreement. There isn't a bipartisan effort to reauthorize. So how do we work within the system that we have now? How do we capitalize on the opportunities that we have in conjunction with this administration's vision that because this administration wants to see people get employed. This administration wants to see businesses thrive and have a highly skilled workforce. I think this system is extremely well positioned to do that. But I do think there's some tweaks within the current legislation that waivers can help us remove some of the barriers that we've historically had to work around to make the impact that we're looking to make.
I agree with you. I think our time invested in reauthorization right now seems as time not well invested, because if it didn't pass in a bipartisan effort, it's much less, I think, likely to pass in a partisan effort. But to your point, when we were at the NOB Forum a few weeks ago, the USDOL, Henry Mack from USDOL, kind of said that to us, right? Hey, we're open to waivers. We want to hear what would make your job easier to be successful. And so I would love to join with you in that effort for us to, put our heads together with Rick Beasley, a great colleague and friend from Miami, and mentor. I learned a lot from Rick over the years. I'm grateful that he's always been generous too with his time with me. So Rick, if you're watching, thank you. I also enjoyed him taking a lot of pride and satisfaction of how far we've moved the needle here, because again, we always go to learn from the best, but you have to put it into action, right? So would love to, sit down with you and our peers from across the nation to submit ideas, to identify things. If they're asking us, and it's about the now, under the current legislation, under the ability of waivers, let's identify what we think would help us do a better job than we're doing now, so we can hopefully, from that baseline, say this is why we need to be reauthorized at higher funding levels, because if we're doing this good work now, look at the great work we could do if you invested more. So Agreed. Count me in on that.
Yeah, okay, I will.
Yeah, I think so in that lane then, there's 570 plus local workforce boards across the country, some rural, some urban, some big, some small, some more integrated than others, some driving innovation more than others. But in general, what would you like to see local boards do more of today?
All of the things that we've talked about, I guess, but one of the things I'd like to see more boards do is the things that you have done, and you talked about, Rick, and others that have come before them. I mean, we stand on the shoulders of some really, really innovative, creative, and impactful people that were really generous with their time and raising the floor. So I'd like to see us helping the other boards, because some of the knocks on our system is warranted. There's some systems that aren't as impactful as others, and some of it's a result of the legislation itself, but people are managing to the measures and not to the ultimate impact. But I think if we can help raise the floor in some other communities and other folks be more proactive in engaging with other boards to see what's happening nationally, to see like what the membership of the Conference of Mayors, who you and I are participants in, with some of the most progressive boards in the country, sharing freely the great work that you're doing. Organizations like NOB really helping raise the floor. So what I'd like to see is more boards working with their counterparts to raise the floor. I'd like to see the underperforming boards reaching out more and asking for assistance to get better.
I agree with that. I think you've talked about how it starts with asking. You have to be willing to, find somebody who's doing it better than you, be open to learning from them. And then those folks that, and then there's been many along the way. We mentioned Rick, but there's such a long list, right? Many of them are in that room. Michael Gritton from Kentucky, Lorea from Dallas, just on and on. Pam Neighbors from Orlando, people who were always generous with me. And that's why I try to also, when somebody calls me, welcome that and say, yes, we'll share with you what's working for us and maybe what hasn't worked for us. So with that being said, you talked about one of the things that makes us very unique here in our region, where we partner not just with the Vegas Chamber and a local business, but with the 4 library districts here, the Las Vegas Clark County Library District, Henderson, North Las Vegas, Boulder City. We also partner with the municipalities to be in recreation centers, community centers. So it's a total of 25 locations for American Job Centers that we don't pay rent or security or electricity or gas or water. And that adds up to over $1.2 million.
That's great.
So if in our region, we could generate $1.2 million of additional funds that can, in turn, instead of paying for bills, serve more job seekers and serve more businesses. Now, that's something that doesn't get credit in the common measures, but yet it's the value of a local board convening and forming partnerships. What other kinds of innovations or initiatives like that one would impact our work as we move forward in this context that we're setting?
Yeah, I think all of those things that you said, inclusive of blending funding streams. I mean, some of the most progressive boards aren't completely reliant on WIOA. They're getting grants elsewhere that they can help raise the floor with those additional funds. So I'd say that. I'd say, we have to be smarter about how we work and thinking about how do we leverage technology to be more impactful. And then, it's not about credit, right? It's about working closely with the other partners on the ground in their communities and really understanding what's going on and not working in silos, but working in tandem and creating collective impact within the communities we serve. Because there's a lot of organizations outside of the WIOA system that are doing some really great work that we need to be working in tandem with.
Well, I think as we've hopefully demonstrated to you already with our actions, but let me say the words again, you can count on us and here in Southern Nevada to be a part of a collective that Equus, as you have relationships across the whole nation, if you see us as part of an opportunity to have collective impact, count us in. I think one of the things that we hope to also get better at moving forward is that diversification of revenue that you talked about. I think you heard us announce at the forum that we have partnered with Jobs First USA to form a 501c3 that can give potential donors the tax exemption. Workforce Connections is a governmental agency that was formed by 8 jurisdictions, 4 counties, 4 cities to administer these federally funded programs. And so consequently, we cannot give the tax benefit to somebody who comes in. And we are fortunate enough that our work, our convening, our partnerships has drawn the attention of funders like the Walter S. Johnson Foundation and the Lincroft Foundation. And while, again, some donations don't require that, the big ones do. And so that's our next chapter where we are partnering again with our friends at Jobs First USA to form Jobs First Southern Nevada. And hopefully that will help us scale our work. At the end of the day, those funds, will go into the very work that we partner with you to do in the American Job Center. So keep your eyes open for that. I'll keep you updated on how that initiative is going.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Jobs First comes out of New York. I know Marjorie well. They've done great work for a long period of time. The other thing that I'd mention that there's an opportunity. I think with risk becomes opportunity. I mean, with Medicaid, the risk to some of our population losing benefits. I think there's other organizations and companies that have skin in this game that care about people maintaining their benefits. So we're doing some work in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, with Jesse Cray, who I think you know. How do we work with large healthcare systems to create on-ramps for those Medicaid recipients, ensure that we can give training for them to enter into the healthcare systems and also maintain their benefits. But we talked a little bit about it at NAB, but I think there's a greater conversation for the workforce community about what's going to happen with all these folks on Medicaid that's about to lose their benefits, and how do we help them.
I agree. Doug, let's shift gears a little bit, because we've talked a lot about your professional life, and you work long hours, you travel a lot, so your family probably shares the sacrifice with you. But when you're not working, traveling, when you're not volunteering, how do you recharge your batteries? How do you re-energize so that on Monday morning, again, you can get on that next plane, you can come to Vegas? What do you and your family, what hobbies, activities do you enjoy and fill your cup?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I exercise and run every day, and it's, as you said, I travel a lot, so it's a great way to see a city. I'm operating on East Coast time, so I was out on the streets of Vegas this morning at 4 a.m. running. So it was great to see the city at that time. I spend almost all of my free time with my family. I have two boys, a 16-year-old Sean and a 19-year-old Aiden, and my wife Nanette. And so I'm just trying to find ways that they'll want to spend time with me. So I golf, but I'm not a golfer, right? So they're golfers, but so I golf with them. So there's nothing better than getting out on a golf course at 7 a.m. and just walking and spending time with them. I ski, but I'm not a skier because they ski. So I spend a little time with them on the slopes, and then I sit in the lodge and just wait for them to finish up. So that fills my cup. That's why I do what I do. Other than it's the purpose of our work, and be able to help people become self-empowered with the skills and information that they need to find good jobs with career advancement potential. The impact that we make of placements and revenue created for communities. That's one way of which we measure it. But it's the dignity of work, food on the table, roof over the head, those types of things. So that fills me up, the purpose of the work. But just spending time with my family and helping them be good people, I hope, is really what keeps me going.
Well, thanks for sharing that very personal side of you. We finish our podcast usually with another deep question that's very personal. Obviously, your journey, as you share with us, has taught you a lot of things. You've gained a lot of wisdom. Yeah. Hopefully these white hairs we have are worth something, right? But if there was somebody listening, a young person, boy or girl, who said, I relate to Doug because I grew up where he did, or because I have 2 years in the military like he did, and one day I would love to be the CEO of an organization that's changing lives, 70,000 of them. What would you transfer to them if you could, and say, hey, there's a lot, but here's one or two things that helped me, and it would do you good if you focus on them?
Believe. You got to have hope. You got to believe in yourself. In the business that we're in, you have to believe that, people have the capacity to change, systems have the capacity to change, communities have the capacity to change, and more importantly, that we have the capacity to change, right? So that place that you're in right now is just a moment in time, right? Things will change, but you have to lean into your own future and believe in it. I was very fortunate when I was younger that I had mentors that when I didn't believe in myself, they said, you can borrow, if you don't have any faith in yourself, you can borrow some of mine. So believe in yourself. Believe that there's endless possibilities, and don't believe some of that narrative, that stories that maybe society or your community or others have told you about yourself, and sometimes you adopt that story and continue that narrative in your head. It's a false narrative. It's not true. People can be anything that they want to be as long as they believe. Believe, and then take the action one step at a time, and understand that I didn't get to my position through leaps and bounds, right? There is no leaps and bounds. There's no silver bullet. There's only incremental progress, right? So just taking one step at a time every day, just waking up and trying to do the best that you can, because you're responsible for the effort, not the outcome. So every day, if you give your best, at the end of the day, just that's all you can do. And if you didn't, you'll give them hell the next day.
That's fantastic advice. I heard some military in there, so I love it. Yeah. I can't think of a better way to end this podcast. I want to thank you for setting the time aside to come here, because your time is very valuable. You spread it across the nation, all your clients. So thank you for joining us today here, Doug.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your partnership, but thank you for what you do, not only for the community here, but for the greater community in the U.S. and the workforce systems. You've always been, as I said, so generous with your time and your information, and you care not only about this community, which you do deeply, but you care about the systems that serve them and trying to help them be better and ultimately more impactful. And I really appreciate you and your friendship.
Thank you, Doug. Well, that's it for another episode of the WC Podcast. We want to thank all the crew that makes this happen behind the scenes, and we hope to see you at a future episode. Until then, stay safe. Well, Doug, thank you for staying to do our bonus segment called In the Hot Seat. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. The first segment is called Your Favorites. I'm going to give you a category. You're going to give me your favorite thing in that category. Let's start with an easy one. Your favorite food.
Pizza.
Your favorite beverage with dinner.
Water.
Favorite dessert after dinner.
Chocolate cake.
Favorite way to start your day.
Exercise.
Favorite way to unwind after a long day.
Spending time with the family.
Favorite hobby or weekend activity.
Golf.
Favorite vacation spot.
Puerto Rico.
Favorite holiday.
Christmas.
Favorite car you've ever owned.
Chevy Nova.
Favorite college sports team.
Notre Dame.
Favorite professional sports team.
Jets.
You made it through the favorites. Great job. The next segment gets a little tougher, so we call it Tough Choices. I'm going to give you two choices, and hopefully you can pick one, but if you can't, both is a valid answer.
Okay.
Vacation or staycation?
Vacation.
Fly or drive there?
Fly.
Hotel or Airbnb?
Hotel.
When you retire one day, will it be in the city or on a ranch?
Ranch.
If you could have a day by yourself, would you like to spend it by the ocean or in the mountains?
Mountains.
Here's where it gets tougher, Doug.
Okay, I'm ready.
Having more money or having more time?
Time.
If you were a superhero, the ability to fly or breathe underwater?
Fly.
The ability to speak with animals or speak any foreign language?
Language.
This is the three toughest ones. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You must pick one. Two choices. Truth or kindness?
Kindness.
Actions or words?
Action.
Justice or grace?
Grace.
Well, you made it through tough choices. Good job, Doug. We're rounding the corner here. And the last segment is called Finish the Sentence. I'm going to give you 95% of the sentence, and you're going to finish it for me. Doug, if you could visit any place in the world, it would be?
India.
The best part about living in New York City is?
Diversity.
Your favorite thing about your job as the president and CEO of Equus is?
Making impact.
And if you could travel back in time to any year, you would travel to?
I don't know. When my sons were born.
Nice. 3 words that describe you, Doug, are?
Driven, passionate, empathetic.
I couldn't agree more. And doing the WC podcast here with us today was?
Fun.
Awesome. Well, Doug, thanks for staying over and
Simon.
doing our bonus segment.